The clock is ticking, and time is short. But it's not too late. Modern day pioneers. Our mission involves patience, perseverance, peaceful protest to achieve justice and fundamental human rights. United against many odds. Exposure. Through information. Mankind is suffering. Our goal is to bring back love, truth, freedom, and humanity. Feel welcome. Feel free.
Welkom bij het 8 uur journaal. Vanavond weer een medische Zoom en met een speciale gast. Die woont in de Verenigde Staten, dus we doen de uitzending in het Engels. Welcome, Sasha.
Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. You are in the United States. For you, it is early in the morning. We are pre-recording this. Tell us, who is Sasha?
Sasha. Hi, so my name is Sasha Latypova. I'm originally from Ukraine. I grew up in Ukraine, actually in the Soviet Union, and then it became Ukraine. And then I came to the US in late 90s for my MBA degree. I went to Dartmouth College, which is in Hanover, New Hampshire. And so I studied for a Master's of Business Administration. And then I graduated, and my work ever since was essentially in pharmaceutical research and development industry in different fields, but most of them had to do with data analysis from clinical trials. And so I first consulted with these companies. I worked in litigation support. So a lot of these companies obviously involved in a variety of lawsuits. And so they need a bunch of consultants helping them crunch the numbers. That's what I was doing. And then I started my own companies. I started several, they're called clinical research organizations or CROs. These are companies that work in pharmaceutical or medical device clinical trials. And the role is to collect data from clinical trials globally. And we worked in all countries of the world. And then collect this data and analyze it and then submit it to the regulators, to the pharmas and to the regulators for the purposes of drug approval. And so we were highly regulated, as the entire pharmaceutical industry is highly regulated, and it has a lot to do with quality and also traceability of every step that you do with the data or with the chemical or with whatever. You have to be able to trace back if something goes wrong. You have to be able to trace back and say, here are the steps that were done. This is who changed what. So all of that needs to be recorded and documented. So while I was working in the industry, to me, it all looked fine, and it looked like it was working pretty well because we had to comply with so many regulations and we had to be audited all the time. And so were pharmaceutical companies. So I thought the system is working and I was trusting it. And I left the industry. I sold my companies and I left the industry in around 2015. And I was living a happy life. And then this whole pandemic started. And as we were just discussing, I realized immediately we're being lied to. And first it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this person said this about hydroxychloroquine, where I know and that they know and they know that I know that that's a lie. You know?
Yeah, and then you're specifically referring to the stories that it can cause heart failure. And of course, the paper in the Lancet, I think on the 21st of May, 2020, which was very suspicious from the start. Everybody who has a scientific mind who read it was like, how is this being set up?
Exactly. That particular, it was by this company, which looked also pretty fake. It's called Surgisphere. And when I read that publication, I was like, what are you talking about? Like the thing that stood out to me, because I was involved in cardiac safety testing of drugs. One of our CROs was specifically focused on specific cardiovascular safety tests that they run before a drug can go on the market. And one of them was this QT prolongation, which they were claiming that hydroxychloroquine, first of all, has that, and second of all, causes heart attacks. And I knew that it doesn't. And I knew that I've seen the data and it doesn't have that. And I know that the experts knew that because it's a very simple metric. And when they said that, it just immediately came to me. And they also in the paper, they were claiming that they had recordings of torsade de pointe, which is one of extremely rare arrhythmias to record. And they had a variety of them from places like Africa, where they don't even have continuous recorders very often. So I was like, well, that just doesn't look, because I had a university database of about 30-year-old database with thousands of people, and we only had 4 of those recordings. They're so rare. And these people were claiming, oh, we just got 4 in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it was suspicious from the start. And I know when I went through it, it was not even only the data, but also the experimental design. It was so there was a lot of things wrong, yet a lot of agencies went with it and they blocked the usage, especially in the first line, the outpatient setting of hydroxychloroquine. Yet they pushed some other substances like remdesivir as a cure.
Yeah, exactly. It was unprecedented. The suppression of safe, effective, long-term, especially in medicine, you always have a preference for something that's been on the market for a long time versus something completely new. Always. There's no case where that's the opposite, because for doctors, it's not that, and even if something can cause certain risks, you'd rather know what those risks are and see it over a long time so that you can then exclude the patients, or you can warn the patient to watch out for certain things. But certainty is always preferred over uncertainty. And they're saying, no, don't use this certain medicine, use this completely unproven one, because we say so. And
that is actually what's happening with the experimental injections. I refuse to call it vaccine, because a vaccine,
they're injections, yeah.
Yes, a vaccine contains an antigen which is not present, or at least not what is marketed. And what it seems now is that they do not elicit an immune response that is longer lasting than 1 season, which renders it completely useless. But before we go into the big disadvantages of these jabs, maybe explain a little bit about good laboratory practice and good manufacturing practice, because they're at the core of what you have discovered or what you see in the data.
Yes, exactly. So as I said, pharmaceutical industry is highly regulated. Everybody who works in it has to comply with certain laws. These laws are called good manufacturing practices in the US. They may have a little bit different name in Europe. Some of you may be familiar with ISO standards. So it's basically a set of laws and regulations that are designed to ensure safety of mass-produced, especially medicines, but they also apply to food. And of course, you can imagine that if you are a doctor prescribing a particular medication, very important part of it is the dose. So, and the doses are in like milligrams, nanograms, they're very tiny. So you have to have huge precision of a plant that spits out millions of these doses every day, right? So to ensure that, you have to have a huge amount of regulation and quality control. So all this regulation is designed to ensure that the manufacturer follows quality control, and they follow it consistently. And in general, in pharmaceutical manufacturing, if you ask any person from pharmaceutical manufacturing, they'll tell you, oh my God, we're obsessive. We have these incredibly detailed procedures and incredibly detailed quality control steps just to make sure that we're not tainting something, right? Accidentally, or there's some act of terrorism, crime, somebody wants to mess with our systems, we also can catch that, right? So because there were several high-profile cases, and this spans back decades, For example, in the 80s in the US, there was a huge case where a Tylenol, which is a common over-the-counter headache medication, right, a painkiller, there were 7 deaths in the Chicago area, and it was later found that they were associated with this couple of bottles of Tylenol that were tainted with cyanide. And so when that happened, Johnson & Johnson, which is the manufacturer of Tylenol, removed entire supply from the shelves. Whatever they had shipped to the stores, they removed all of those bottles.
Just to be sure that...
Just to be sure, yeah, because it's a big deal. They were like, well, somebody messed with it, it got tainted, and now we don't know who did what, but before we start investigating, we have to stop, remove everything. And that's a proper procedure, by the way. So you remove, either you remove the lot that you know that this came from, or you remove the entire thing if you can't tell. And so that's what they did. They removed, it was voluntary recall. When I went to business school, this was a Harvard Business School case of how wonderful Johnson & Johnson was for doing this. And I do commend them for that. That was the right thing to do. So they removed it, they investigated. I don't know if they found.
So this was not in the good laboratory practice. It was not about the research that is being done, but just the production. It was already admitted to the market, and still there is strenuous testing and protocols to be followed to have a very high degree of product integrity.
Exactly. So Tylenol was invented way back, and nobody was doing research with it. It's an over-the-counter medicine. It was just the production. Somebody interfered with this production somewhere, tainted the bottles with cyanide. 7 people died. Johnson & Johnson identified it quickly, and they removed the whole thing from the market. And then they retested their production line, and that's from that point on, that's when the tamper evident containers started coming out. So that was one of the measures was developed based on this case, so that people know that container wasn't tampered with.
So there's a lot of checks and balances to guarantee product safety.
Yeah, guarantee product safety and consistency. So you want the Tylenol performing the same way over and over and over again, because Tylenol in particular, it's actually not a very safe medicine. By the way, it's much less safe than hydroxychloroquine. Like if you look on the safety record of Tylenol, it's orders of magnitude less safe than hydroxychloroquine, particularly because it interferes with alcohol. So if somebody has been drinking, you can get liver injury with it, right? So, but it doesn't happen with hydroxychloroquine. Anyway, so that's what happened with Tylenol, and that's why you have these production steps, and that's why you have these control steps, and that's why all of these and VAERS exist. I know a few audience is familiar with the system, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, that's maintained by CDC. It's called, we call it VAERS. They maintain it specifically for the reason of identifying these unusual things, flags, unusual things, unusual data patterns, to flag this and to start looking in more specifically into a product that has generated this unusual data pattern to determine what's going on, right? So that's what their purpose is. That's what they advertise themselves for.
Clear. Now, how do you feel about the current injections? Do they meet the GLP and GMP standards?
Right. So that's what we started looking in. Well, first I became very suspicious how quickly these products were put on the market. I became very suspicious when they said, oh, this whole study is going to be phase 1, 2, and 3 together, which has never been done before. We usually have different phases of development, and you have to complete first phase and look at the results to determine if you can go to the second phase. And just put all of them together, that makes no sense to me. And then when the VAERS data started coming in, and this is now again, a year later after they started mass injecting people, we see all these huge adverse events. And then somebody, a friend of mine, brought it up to me. He said, oh, there are lot numbers in VAERS system, and you can look at this data by lot number. So that's what I did. I went into Weyers and I looked at the lot numbers, and it immediately became very strange. The whole distribution pattern was just highly, highly unusual. And we're still investigating it, and we're still doing further analysis. But overall, first thing we saw was that there's a huge number of lot numbers that are associated with only one event. And then like half of the database. And then a few lot numbers that are associated with thousands of events. And they cover, like if you look at the raw data, about 1% of the lots contain 80% of adverse events.
Well, then normally you would say there's something wrong here, because the consistency is failing. It's supposed to be the same product.
It's supposed to be the same product. And we're like, well, clearly it's not, because if you have one lot that has 5,000, which is a true number for one of the lots of Moderna, has 5,000 adverse event in one lot, and then you have 12,000 lot numbers that have only one each.
So there is something wrong. That is not even the debate here.
Exactly. Right on the surface, you see it's wrong. It shouldn't be that way. I've never seen it that way. So
in the British Medical Journal, I think it was Peter Doshi himself who published the whistleblower of Vestavia. It's also, I think, a subcontractor doing clinical trials. And they actually saw a lot of things wrong with these trials, not only data integrity, but what we said, the GLP, GMP, also the internal structure of people flagging it, being fired. So they even said, well, this amounts to fraud. Normally, when part of the clinical trials is being proven to be fraudulent, what happens with a clinical trial at that moment, or with the product?
They have to immediately stop it. If you identified fraud in a clinical trial, it has to stop. And that's been done. That was a routine procedure in the clinical trial industry. So they'd stop the trial. They would start, going back and forth with the regulators and submitting, doing internal audit. The regulators would send auditors, figure out what's gone wrong, what happened. There was a huge, huge event, and this was when I was still working in the industry. One of the clinical research organizations was conducting phase 1 study, which usually are small studies in healthy volunteers. And they're small, like you only dose 8 people at a time. And you look you do all kinds of measurements. And then you think about, if you see all this, okay, then I go to the next 8 people. So these are very highly controlled trials. And the CRO in Europe dosed, and actually you don't even dose them all at the same time, one by one, right? And they dosed 8 at the same time, and 6 of them had severe adverse event immediately, and 2 people, I think, died. That was like, it was immediately stopped. The drug was canned. The company was like, it was a scandal. You can't believe how big it was. Like, the whole industry was just, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe they dosed them all at the same time. Who does that? And here we have, 1 million people a day dosed at the same time with this thing that we don't understand at all. So I'm just telling you the magnitude, like, if you work in the industry and how always obsessive and precise, and, people are saying, like, people who don't know the industry, they're saying, oh, big pharma, they're evil. They've always been evil. And this is like a normal. No, it's not normal. I mean, maybe they are evil, but they were behaving very well up until 2020.
Exactly. And then something really strange happened.
Yeah. Because me and, you've seen Dr. Mike Eden talking about this. People who come from the industry, we are more shocked than people outside of the industry, because we've seen that it worked. We've seen that the procedures exist, the laws exist. We've seen the punishment of those who don't follow the laws. So we, coming from the world that worked, and like that, it doesn't work anymore. So that's what it is.
So can you share something with us, what you found exactly with these batches?
So yeah, I can, do you want me to share my screen?
Sure.
Talk through okay, so I can talk through my analysis. By lot number. Okay. Right, so as I said, we started looking, first thing we found that there was a huge discrepancy between what we call high frequency lots and low frequency lots. And the thing that people need to understand, VAERS is not designed for cause and effect relation, like to determine and conclusively prove cause and effect relationship. VAERS is insufficient, but it is designed to flag unusual patterns. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at highly unusual data patterns, and they indicate about something's going wrong and you have to stop and investigate. And we do have kind of now at this point pretty high evidence of corporate and government malfeasance, because not just the corporations are breaking these laws of good manufacturing practices, but the governments are allowing them, because prior to this, they were not allowing them to break the laws. Now they're allowing them to break the laws. So what happened? I don't know. We have to investigate this. And also, this is not a scientific debate. So I frequently talk to scientists, and they're in a science mindset. They're like, well, but this, I also need this covariate and that covariate, and I need to do this regression and blah, 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 until I can make this conclusion. I am saying this is not a science debate. It's a forensic investigation.
Exactly. So you look if the data supports the evidence or the hypothesis that the GMP is not followed and that there's gross negligence. That is a very different research than what you would do to find the mechanisms behind the registrations.
Exactly. So it's just like your bank will flag some unusual activity, right? Are they proving conclusively? No, they just flag it. They stop your credit card just to prevent fraud, and then call you, right? It's exactly what I'm saying here. I see unusual activity, I'm flagging it, you have to stop and start investigating. So, and also this is not exactly efficacy and safety debate about the vaccines or injections or whatever you want to call them, but it is related to safety overall, because when the scientists are making statements about safety and efficacy of a product, the underlying assumption under all of this, that the product is produced under good manufacturing practices, it's consistent, it's the same product in every pill, every bottle, every drop. And then we can test the heterogeneous product, the homogeneous product, sorry, and we know that it's high quality product, we can test it, and then we can make determinations of safety and efficacy. Here I'm saying we're not even at the level of consistent product we're testing. So we can't make any statements about safety and efficacy, which it's unsafe because it's heterogeneous. And we also have some evidence of malfeasance and willful misconduct. And by the way, willful misconduct is the only legal criterion under which the pharma companies are liable. Otherwise, they're not liable.
Exactly, and that made it, because we talked about this before, that made it very peculiar that a lot of the things that you have flagged were already in the submissions of these companies, and they were known at the FDA, the EMA, and these agencies that normally have to say, well, if this is wrong, then you do not get a permit. Yeah. And they went ahead and shipped the products anyway. So that's what we're finding. So they're both liable, the pharmas and the regulators that are allowing them to do this, and the governments, the CDC, local health agencies, that they also all know this, and they're all continuing with this. And then the media, and of course, healthcare establishment, employers and schools. So employers and schools might not know this, but they should, because at the end of the day, when these guys are prosecuted, they're going to blame low-level manufacturing people. They're going to blame every vaccinator out there saying, oh, you didn't properly consent the patient. We told you, but you didn't. And then they're going to blame employers. They're going to blame schools. And all of you guys, I'm telling you, who are right now pushing these mandates, you're going to be it. Even though they told you, oh, you're exempt, guess what? No, when the push comes to shove and they're prosecuted, they will blame you and you will be hanging, not them. Well, I hope it will be them, but the first people to be blamed will be low-level people and not associated with pharma companies. So everybody should be aware of that and think about your future liability. So again, vaccine manufacturing must be stopped right now and investigated. And another overall point is that these vaccines are for nobody. There's no group out there, no health-based group, no risk-based group, no age-based group for whom this vaccine or injection is a good idea and has shown any benefit. There's no benefit of this. Exactly. The risk-benefit ratio is negative for all strata.
all groups, and it has shown negative efficacy. It has shown incredible number of adverse events. So VAERS right now contains 21,000 deaths, over 21,000 deaths, and over 1 million injuries. And we know underreporting is 10 to 40. So you can multiply this by 10 to 40 to get to the actual
Exactly,
magnitude.
and this is for the United States only, the VAERS.
So this now contains actually some European data, but we don't know how much. So we see some foreign data in it, but it's still a question, like, what is it, like, what is it, which countries it's coming from? We know it's from EMA, and
so if we look at the EMA, I think we are already close to 40,000 deaths, as it's a larger area. So definitely this is not the whole picture.
It's not the whole picture, yeah, exactly. But that just gives you an idea of the order of magnitude of things we're talking about. Also there's no, so there's this, people started saying, oh, but you're saying that some lots are safe. No, I'm not saying that some lots are safe. If you have a poisoned, if you don't have a good manufacturing practice compliance, your product is de facto poison. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't have to go and test every vial and say these are poisonous, these are not. It's just because I see this huge erratic behavior of data, and I know that you're not GMP compliant, all of this is deemed de facto poison. Like in the US, for example, they have laws against unpasteurized milk, right? And they have some farmers that produce raw milk because people want it for health benefits. So the FDA will descend on them and destroy the whole supply of milk just using this logic. They're saying you're not following our regulations for health food production, therefore we're destroying your entire stock. They're not testing, the milk is not poisoned, the milk is fine. They're not testing anything. They're just saying it's de facto poison because you're not following the law.
Exactly. So if you're not compliant with these rules and regulations, we have to assume everything is toxic.
Everything is toxic, everything should be removed, everything should be stopped. So that's my, it's adulterated product. Anyway, so the good manufacturing practices, coming back to that briefly, it's part of Code of Federal Regulation in the US. There are similar laws in other countries. It's actually a set of laws. And if you're not compliant with these laws, you are de facto poison. They're saying in this law, this is a quote from the law, they're saying if you don't comply, this renders your product adulterated, and that means it's poison de facto. Whether it's accidental or on purpose doesn't matter, people die. So that's what it is. So just to test this hypothesis, we did, because again, VAERS is not designed for cause-effect relationship. When you don't have that, you want some kind of a control. So we're comparing with the control group, which is seasonal flu vaccines. We selected them because they're obviously similar for similar disease, and they're given to, in the US, to about 50% of the population every year. And so we took only injectable products, and we compared them with the 3 mRNA vaccines that are sold in the US, which is Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen. And you can see that here we have a lot of data on the flu vaccine side. Actually, it was about 30 years of data in VAERS available for these vaccines. We found 22,000 manufacturing lots. And for mRNA vaccines, we found 24,000 manufacturing lots, 25,000 manufacturing lots.
So that makes it a comparable volume.
It's comparable data set, yes. Very comparable data set, actually. And so, and you can see that even like just the order of magnitude of adverse events. And we only look at serious adverse events because on the total adverse events, VAERS, especially in the COVID vaccines, contains a lot of administrative errors, and we didn't want to include them. So, but you can see that the difference is huge. And serious adverse event is something serious, like when they call it serious, it's like it's near death experience. It includes death, life-threatening, disability, you went to emergency room, you were hospitalized, things of that nature. It's not like I had a headache. Okay, that's not what it is. Serious is serious. It's almost life-threatening or actual death. And so when we look at the flu vaccines, this is how a product that's manufactured under good manufacturing practices should look like.
So this is a very even distribution with some outliers that reach a 20, or I see even a 35, but normally they are well within the range of 10.
Exactly. So, and by the way, you're looking at 20 2,000 data points over 30 years of time, and you see how tight they are, right? Well, yeah, because that's what you would expect from a pharmaceutical grade manufacturing process. You know, they know exactly what they're doing. They're producing them to, and these are different manufacturers also, but they're producing the same type of product, so it's interchangeable. And yeah, it is interchangeable. It looks, as far as like adverse events, the overall range is around 5 or less, like 4, and then we have these 2 outliers, and they're, you know, the maximum is 37 and this is 23. So yeah, so that's how it's supposed to look like over time. And I can say, maybe you think that they're unsafe, but at least they're consistent. They're consistent and they're well manufactured. Now, when we did the same plot for these COVID vaccines, I was shocked, because this is not something you're supposed to see if you think that this is a pharmaceutical grade anything. Because here we have three clear distributions, because we have 3 manufacturers. They should not be like, so the FDA claims that they're, and European regulators claim that they're interchangeable. So they're saying Pfizer is the same as Moderna, is the same as Janssen. And on top of that, Pfizer says, oh, we have an FDA approved product, which must be produced under GMP. And it's interchangeable with our emergency use authorization product for, you know, you can say under emergency, FDA can waive some GMP requirements, but not all of them. And so, but they're saying it's the same as our FDA approved, which must comply 100% to GMP. So then, okay, this just does not look like that's happening.
And
Okay,
the
so
red line, that was the line of the previous shot, and you can see that we're talking about another order of magnitude. Now the outliers are above 600, which is a completely different number.
Exactly. And you can also see how many outliers. So again, when people are saying, well, you're claiming hot lots, I don't see any hot lots. And when they are saying hot lots, they have this picture in mind. Yeah, these 2, you can call them hot lots, right? I'm saying half of my data is hot lot. So
yeah, so you can't even talk about toxic batches, but a toxic product or a very unregulated heterogeneous product.
It's a heterogeneous product. I cannot even tell you this is the same product within manufacturers and between manufacturers. It's so, the variation is so huge, you cannot possibly call it the same. So we don't know what they're producing between themselves, and we don't know that it's consistent, it's not consistent. And lot to lot, we also do not see any consistency. Oops, sorry. And that's a huge flag. That's a huge flag, just to say your manufacturing process is completely out of control. Okay, so that's just proves that. Now, I did a numerical assessment of the same phenomenon, and we use coefficient of variation to determine how variable one data set from another data set. And so we ran this coefficient of variation for flu vaccines, and it was 200. So percent is just, it doesn't have actual measure. The coefficient of variation is just expressed in percentages often. So 299. So let's say that's our benchmark for the flu vaccines. And if I remove those 2 outliers in the flu vaccines, it would be much, much lower here. Anyway, and then for Moderna and for all COVID vaccines, we find that it's up to like 1200% variability. So that's why we're saying they're like 10 to 12 times more variable than flu vaccines. We know flu vaccines are manufactured under good manufacturing practice. So you're 10 times out of good manufacturing practice range, which to me says,
so this table doesn't say anything about the toxicity. It just says about something about the heterogeneity.
Yeah, so they're so heterogeneous that I cannot tell you that that's the same product. It's not the same product. If your beer in a can was like 1000% different from another can, it wouldn't be a beer. It would be something else, right? So that's what we're saying here. And our other colleague, Craig, he looked specifically into the numerical codes associated with these lot numbers. So each company has their own schema, how they number their lots. Some it's just strings of numbers, and some are letters and numbers. And specifically for Moderna, he did this analysis, and he looked at their Moderna has a complicated like it's number and then letter and then some more numbers. So he looked at the different, so the letter that's in the middle of the Moderna code, there's one letter, and so he looked by this letter, and he arranged them like all the batches that had that letter in their batch number. He arranged them, and he found this very interesting pattern, which is non-random. Definitely, it's non-random. And again, in something consistently produced, you do not expect that based on the number of the lot that you pick off the shelf, like every food product, every drug has this lot number. So if you pick up a lot number, that would tell you something about the numbers of adverse events associated with it. So that's just ridiculous. That doesn't happen that way. So he found this kind of unusual non-random pattern. And he says, well, okay, so it's also associated with, some numbers are associated with very distinct levels of toxicity. So in this case, one is just when you have one event, and then when you he scaled it, and so you look at the spread. These are the most toxic ones, and these are the least toxic ones. But we're not saying that they're safe. We're just saying that the toxicity that exists across all of the lots varies in a very unusual way.
Now, what you mean with toxicity is that the amount of adverse effects and deaths that are occurring within that batch.
Yes, exactly. So he just arranged them by here. I think he's looking at all adverse events, but yeah. So, but we see the same pattern with if we look of all adverse events or serious adverse events only or deaths only. The pattern remains the same. They're just maybe narrower than these ones, than these bars. And so we're like, not only we see this erratic behavior, huge variability, we also see some kind of a system, and a system with labels. And so to me, that already indicates into a premeditated nature. Now, of course, premeditated because we know, because they're all lying, and the government is lying as well together with them. So, okay, so they're already in cahoots, we know that. But this is also some sort of a planning and execution.
Exactly, this looks like a plan, and let's find out, because I have some questions about the age distribution, the dates that they were administered, the groups they were administered, the normal seasonal effects. So how can we exclude which is which? But we have to keep in mind, we're not looking specifically for the mechanism, only for the forensics. And the heterogeneity is actually already enough.
So when I go to this analysis or this analysis, right? So this already includes all those questions, because at this level of comparison, when we're just looking versus flu vaccines, we already took into account all those factors: the age, the seasonality, gender, whatever, comorbidities. Because our underlying population is very similar for who receives flu vaccines and who receive these vaccines. And we're looking at the total system variability on the output. So we don't have a view into details, but we see the total system output. And vaccines are designed to be given to health population or anybody, frankly. So that makes it all comparable. And on this level, we know they're different. And because if those factors that you're saying, like age, gender, and so forth, played some certain role, we wouldn't see it that way. Anyway, so but this includes all of those factors here. Now, in Craig's analysis, that it's not included. We're looking at one manufacturer, at specific lot numbers and adverse events. And this, you could try to tease out those factors, and we're doing additional analysis, and we're trying to see. So to me, like number one, for example, is we need to correlate this with the vaccination rates, like because they went very different. In the US, it was a huge spike because there was a big demand in vaccination early in the year, so the spike, the top of it occurred somewhere in April. And then from April, there was a very, very steep decline. And now actually they're going vertically down, and they're no longer updating even those numbers because they're afraid to show people that nobody's getting vaccinated. Frankly, it's stopped. Nobody's getting these things anymore.
And
they can't force you.
Yeah, that's the same around the world. That's why
Yeah.
we see this push on the QR code, the 2G rules, the vaccine mandates. And very happy actually to say that in the United States, it seems to stall because all the courts are throwing these mandates out. So that is really the end of the jab program.
We're hoping, like right now there's a big thing in the Supreme Court, but again, even if Supreme Court, the people often don't understand the US, even if Supreme Court says something, that doesn't mean my county is going to do it, you know, because we're very distributed as far as power, and oftentimes it comes to what your county sheriff is willing to enforce. And if you have a good relationship with the county sheriff, you can have your own little fiefdom here, and it's like that, and we all have guns, so it's like
that actually helps. Yeah.
Oh, it helps a lot. You know? So anyway, but you know, besides that, but anyway, so like, yeah, so one of the main factors I think that we haven't examined yet is the vaccination rate and how this relates to vaccination rate. I think it does, and I think there is a very big relationship here with the fall off, especially at the end, with the fall off of vaccination rate, because that affects your kind of like effective lot size, right? So the lot size can be the same for all of these lots, but if you've used up your lot very quickly because people wanted it, that's one size. But then you have the same size lot and people don't want it, your effective lot size is smaller, right? Because they haven't used it. So I think there's a relationship there. I don't think it explains all of this, especially how like letters and numbers relate to it, but it does explain some of the overall trend, and especially the fall off here. Now, also at the end, this is not by time, but it roughly actually looks in time. I'll show you another graph, and it looks like this in time as well. At the end of the period, VAERS was heavily suppressed. CDC is suppressing this data. They're punishing doctors for reporting. They're holding the data and not releasing it and saying, oh, we're just still verifying.
So you're actually saying that that effect is also seen here, is that the brackets become smaller, probably because there's less data available because of the suppression.
There's less data available, like, yeah, so this is not arranged by time, but it actually, when you arrange it by time, it looks very similar. So, but I'll show you this graph. Yeah, so another one, he did the same for Pfizer, and you also see these clusters. So these are the lots they're colored by the first two letters that the lot has. And on his website, howbad.info, Craig has published all this, and you can also go and check your lot number and see where it is as far as toxicity. And we know that specific ones like EN, for example, are very high. And then later on, like G's and F's are much less toxic.
So I think that I also see here is that there's a lot of lots that have almost zero, that are flatlining, and there's a few spikes that have a really high incidence.
Yeah. So you know, there are a couple of things here. Like there are lots that clearly have overall high toxicity, and then there's the group here, or like EK group, for example, it has only few, you know, it's like toxic, but then the spread is huge. You see, right? So like that's very unusual as well.
And this is from one manufacturer, right? This is supposed to be
Pfizer.
One product.
Yeah, this is Pfizer, one product. It's just incredibly bizarre. So like, I can't say it's the same product. I can't say, you see how many like ones and zero. Okay, a lot of these may be typos, but there are also non-typos there. Yeah, so anyway, so then, yeah, this is how they're numbered. You can see Pfizer has 2 letters and then 4 numbers. And Moderna has a very sophisticated way of labeling, and the letters, when I was saying the letters in the middle, it's this letter. So that those are just pointing to it's premeditated, and there's evidence of their labeling something for something. We don't know what it is.
Yeah, so it looks like, and this is what we have been suspecting and actually already have some proof of it, is that the rollout and the QR code amount to a real world data set which amounts to a clinical trial done with the whole world. We are the lab.
Yeah, exactly. So it's highly troubling. So then you were asking about the actually, let me switch and show you. And in fact, hold on. Let me just grab, because my battery is running out of power. So I'm sorry, I just gotta grab the cable.
Sure.
Just a second. Okay. All right, this is much better. Okay, sorry about that. I was on Zoom since like.
So what are we seeing here?
So this is arranged by, these are the lots arranged by adverse event per lot per date the number was first reported to VAERS. So this is a lot, a whole lot, by the number of adverse events that it has, serious adverse events. And this is the date when it was first reported in VAERS. And you can see this pattern, right? So again, I can't, so we still don't have explanation for this huge range. And by the way, I mean, so it looks like they're maybe getting better or whatever you call it over time. But the question is, we're still at 200 adverse events per lot, where remember vaccines are like 5. So it's still very, very large. And if they figured that, oh my God, like all these adverse events are happening, we need to improve our manufacturing, why didn't they recall a single one of these lots? They didn't stop, they didn't recall, and that's already a crime. If you know something is wrong and you are working to fix it while selling that product that's killing people and not telling anyone, I don't care that you've improved. You've killed all these people, and there's an evidence that you knew, and you continued doing it.
Exactly. The only right choice when you see the first 2 months, let's say, is to immediately pull the product because it's killing people.
Exactly. And then we have laws designed to do exactly that. And we have punishment designed to punish this exact behavior.
Well, we actually went to court in Holland, and the judge, which I have filed charges against as well, the case was thrown out. But what was very specific and very peculiar is that the judge denied there was such a law, while the other party admitted that there was a law to pull the drug. So this is, and we have a court of appeal in March about this case. So that's why for us, this is so interesting.
Well, there's law, and there's also case law and the precedent, right? And if in another thing is, if FDA is enforcing, let's say, or EMA is enforcing laws on food producers for this particular thing, and then they're not enforcing it on pharma, that's another evidence of like they're all breaking the law, and you're selectively enforcing these laws. That's also, should be prosecuted. And then people were criticizing this for saying, well, there's a lot of typos. Remember? So yesterday, and for us to determine what's typo and what's not typo, we need to have the verified list of lot numbers, which exists obviously because manufacturers.
Exactly, but what you mean with typo is that the people who register it make a typo in the lot number.
Yeah, so they read the lot number from the card or from the box or whatever, and when they were typing, they made a mistake, or they were reading from handwriting and they didn't read it properly and they made a mistake. So that's a typo in the VAERS database in the lot number, and there's tremendous amount of them. And that's another question, like why we have so many, because this happens with all kinds of products, but with these, it's just staggering, like wave of these typos. Anyway, so everybody criticizes us for, oh, there are so many typos, you can't say anything about this because there's so many typos. And I was like, okay, well, here the pattern is driven not by typos, but by high frequency lots. High frequency lots are not typos because people don't mistype a very complicated string of letters and numbers in exactly the same way 5,000 times from different locations in the world, right? So that's a real number. But we actually yesterday, late breaking news, somebody from CDC leaked the list to us. So they gave us the list. They gave us a list of verified CDC verified lot numbers. And last night, I ran an analysis off of that list. Here, this is, hold on, let me see. This is all of the manufacturers. And now, in addition to the verified list of numbers, we also have exact manufacturing date. So these are arranged by date of manufacture here. Serious adverse events per lot number, same as the other graph. And this is for all locations that we have in theirs. I don't, so most of the vast majority is US, but there's some European. And as you can see, I have a same pattern, except now they're not.
Sorry, so we cannot see maybe you have to reshare your screen, unshare and reshare.
Oh, okay, sure. That is strange. Can you see now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So this is. Remember my previous graph, they were in columns. They were in columns because theirs only reports the months, not exact date, months and year, right? And here we have exact dates of manufacture. So they're essentially in the same pattern, but slightly spread out because now I have exact dates. But the pattern remains the same. And that's what I've been telling everybody. Typos don't matter because the pattern is not driven by typos. It's driven by the large event lots, and those are real numbers. And now we have a confirmation of that. And again, like flu vaccines are here. And these are all of our manufacturers, blue, Moderna, orange, Janssen, and gray, Pfizer.
Yeah, and you see that Janssen is not administered after, what is it, April 2021?
Yeah, there are a couple of them here. Yeah, you're right, but they're kind of stopped already in the US. Mm-hmm. But this is very unusual. This is extremely unusual. And the next thing I'm going to do is color them by within specific manufacturer, color them by the letters and numbers. And you will see that these belong to the same groupings of codes.
Yeah, so now a critical person will say, well, yes, but first the elderly and the frail were injected, and of course they tend to die more often. So what you see is background, and what you see is actually what you would expect if you inject people of lower age. Then you have less adverse events because these people are generally more healthy. And what is your answer to that?
Well, so flu vaccine is also given to elderly and frail, right? I don't see them dying in these humongous numbers. So, I mean, it's true that there is some age distribution here because they were first given to older people and then the younger. And again, yeah, this affects a bit, not as much as I'd say the number of injections that were given. I think that's the primary, like, underlying benign driver, I would call. But the age plays some role, but it's definitely like, you can't say that, oh, well, old people died here, there's like 200 deaths of old people here, and that's fine. No, it's not fine. And if it's so dangerous to them, they shouldn't be injected because they're the risk group. Like if this product is predominantly killing old and frail, well, it shouldn't be given to old and frail. That's the principle of medicine. Like, you don't give something that disproportionately affects a particular age or gender or other group, and you don't give it to them on purpose, right?
Well, and that's another factor that has nothing to do with the date or the age, but the regime that these injections are administered. Everybody needed to have them. There was almost no distinction in maybe you don't need it, or maybe it's a risk for you, so let's not push it. This was rammed down our throats, everybody.
Yeah. And also, again, the same argument. If you were seeing that older people, you know, you started rolling out this product and you see older people dying in nursing homes or whatever as a first wave, you have to immediately stop, first of all, investigate whether that's a real factor, and then exclude them from further rollout, because now you know that they're a risk group. If you decided that, okay, that was the factor, the age was the factor, we think that it affects them more, so we need to exclude them going forward. No, the opposite happened. So like, no matter how you look at this, it's like, yeah, and I do believe, the age of the people has some role, but not very much. Also, we know now that from recent life insurance company report from Indiana, they have shown that especially in the late quarters of 2021, which is when it was given out to more younger people, the deaths of working age adults, 18 to 64-year-old, have increased 40%, and that's a staggering increase. They would say, like,
it intersects with the injection campaign, and that is, I think, the most staggering.
Yeah, completely corresponding to injection campaign, and those are not COVID deaths. These
exactly.
are just deaths.
Because it's also off season. So in the season that young people were injected, this is not the flu season. So the prevalence of COVID was virtually zero.
It was practically nothing across the country. And now we see all these young dead people that life insurance, and by the way, the actuaries in life insurance are the most reliable data source for this kind of data, because they're making money off of this. They're extremely, extremely good at this, much better than any health agency or anybody. So if they're saying that there is an increase, I 100% believe them. So anyway, so that's just to answer people who are saying, well, typos, and then other this pattern is unusual no matter how you look at it. And as far as if this was any normal product, nobody would ever get to this point. It would be stopped like right here. So anyway, that's just to say what's going on here. So let me just reshare the previous presentation. Okay. And so we were here. This is including typos. As I said, they look identical, these patterns, to me. So then if we want to ask a question, is it willful or premeditated, this whole behavior? Well, so what I did is I also got access to, like, somebody sent me these documents. They were leaked about a year ago from European Medicines Agency.
Yes.
And I haven't even looked through all of them, but these two I found because I was looking for the lot size information. I found it here. This first report is European Medicines Agency, summarizing their opinion to Pfizer as far as how ready they are to get authorization to market their product. And the second document is Pfizer responding to FDA also about their queries about manufacturing process and quality. Right? And again, these two documents are from the same time, late November 2020, and it's 2 weeks before they started shipping this commercially. All right, so what I found is that European regulators were, the regulators, and this is coming from the low-level people at the agency. They're writing these reports, right? So they're trying to do their job, as I remember them doing it, and they're still doing it. Okay, so they're writing this report and saying we found 117 major objections and concerns. They're outright stating that Pfizer is not GMP compliant. They list 117 reasons for it and what was not in compliance, and there's some of them are really, really major things. And there was no even they're not even able to produce. I read this document and they describe batches that were tested for quality, and it's obvious that Pfizer is not even able to produce consistent product. And again, whether it's on purpose or by design or accidental, I don't know. But the evidence was that their batches varied dramatically in various parameters, including important parameters like RNA integrity, residual DNA. And remember, we're talking about a modified RNA. So they have to make this RNA. So they're making it from DNA. So they make the RNA, modified RNA from modified DNA. So the product has to contain that RNA strand now. And when you're testing it, you're finding that only 50% contains it. And the rest is all kinds of off-target RNA species and residual DNA. So you're now injecting person with a variety of things. Only 50% of it is coding for what you're saying it's supposed to code. Like, again, nobody has tested this or checked it. It's just based on what Pfizer says. So they're saying we're coding you with the strand for the spike protein, and the 50% is coding for God knows what. Like, who knows?
Yeah. So this is actually a complete no-go. But what baffles me is that the companies were quite open with this data and said, well, we don't know what this product is, but can you please stamp it? Then the lower level regulator said, well, there's a lot of problems. But apparently somewhere up the ladder, somebody said, no, don't look there. Let's push it through.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened here, because so all these guys are like low-level guys are listing all these issues and corresponding to each other. So another thing is like, you know, if people are saying, oh, you know, they're exempt from good manufacturing practices under EUA, well, but then why are regulators behaving in a way that they're not exempt? And why is Pfizer also behaving in a way that says, yeah, we agree, we're not exempt, we need to respond to this? So they're showing that both of them are under understanding that this applies. So it does apply. And they have all these violations. Now, if you have all these violations, then it means that your process, your manufacturing process is completely out of control and it can be interfered with. So it's a perfect cover for any nefarious agenda. Of course, if you want to commit a crime, you want to have no controls. You don't want to have any surveillance. You don't want to have the guards at the warehouse if you want to break into a warehouse. And that's exactly what exists here. So they said, guards, go home, open the doors, and then anybody can walk in and do whatever they want. You know, so that's the situation here. So 2 weeks later, as you say, by magic, despite all these objections, these products begin shipping worldwide in millions of doses. So here in one of these documents, I found the list of Pfizer, 33 lots from Pfizer, which were, by the way, already manufactured by the date these documents were issued. They were manufactured before late November. They were already sitting in the warehouse.
Yeah, so and that's also important. They already produced all this stuff before there was an agreement or an okay.
Yeah, because some of them are in July. See.
And then phase 2 was not even completed.
No.
And then phase 2 and phase 3 is sort of a continuous line until 2024.
Yeah. So they've already produced them. They produced them in massive quantities. So here we have lots that account for 28 million doses. That's huge. They're already produced. They're already sitting in the warehouse. So all this regulatory correspondence is kind of like, who cares, right? They disregard it all, and they ship all this. And then, you know, I now compiled the adverse events from these 33 lots from VAERS, and this is as of December of, you know, like just a few weeks ago, December 2021. And as you can see, the totals here, we have over 40,000 injuries, 1,600 permanent disabilities, and late life-threatening events. These may have resulted in deaths. We don't know because VAERS doesn't do follow-up. There are 1,000 deaths, and this includes one child. So, and I don't know who injected that child, who came up with this brilliant idea, because this was authorized only for adults, and they probably gave them an adult dose, and regardless, it's a poison, and you shouldn't give it to children at all. And this child died. So, so analogy I have here is that, you know, if you're boarding an airplane and it got inspected for safety, and they found 117 major issues with it, and then you decided to fly it anyway. I mean, what do you expect? You expect a disaster, and this is a disaster. So, and I have it associated with specific lot numbers and specific behavior and specific documents, and nobody seems to care.
And that is the baffling thing, that we have never seen this in pharmaceutical industry. Even if you think these are evil companies, this is on a completely different scale.
Completely different scale of evil. You can't imagine the evil. is absolutely awful and staggering. And the only thing is, and I talked to, let me see if I have other slide. Well, yeah, so just a conclusion slide. So we know for sure these are manufactured in non-GMP compliant way. And if people think that, oh, it's just a minor thing, it's just a legalistic term, who cares? I'm so scared of COVID and these things protect me. Well, think again, because the companies themselves cannot legally prove that what they put in the vial is what they tell you they put in the vial. Even if they were well-intentioned, if they have this non-GMP compliant process, they cannot tell you that that's a mRNA vaccine the way they advertise it, and then it's going to protect you from COVID the way they advertise it, because they can't prove that product is in the vial that you get. So whatever is in that vial, chances are it's none of what they're promising you. We know that even what they're promising you cannot work, but like, you don't have to believe us, just look at these numbers. And also this non-GMP compliance can be used for nefarious agenda very easily. Just as I said, if you don't have, you have a warehouse with goods and you send the guards home and you open the doors, what do you expect? The criminals are going to come in and do whatever they like and nobody will know. So this is evidence of willful misconduct. The willful misconduct, because they know this, they've seen these numbers, regulators know this, and nobody's recalling anything, nobody's doing anything about it.
Yeah, and that is the most important part. Whether there's an agenda to kill people, whether there is an agenda to do experiments, those are those are separate issues, I would almost say. What we can conclude here, definitely with the data, is that the regulators knew about the problems, went ahead anyway, and with doing that, it was willful misconduct.
It's willful misconduct from all of them. And they're not, and they're definitely not acting as safeguards for people's health. So my important message is, we know that these guys are criminals and they're continuing the crime, and the criminal cartel is not going to bring itself to justice. So don't expect that anytime soon. What you could do is you could stop. You could make your friends aware, make your family aware, look at these numbers again, contact us for questions. You can go to the howbad.info website and type in your lot number and learn more about it if you have the lot number. And this is how you become aware. This is how we stop. If we all stop and don't comply and stop doing these injections, even if you already had injections and maybe you're fine, don't do it again, because you can see the risk here. It's a Russian roulette.
Exactly, because you might be lucky having a placebo or a non-toxic lot, but given the amount of the heterogeneity of this product, you just don't know.
You don't know. Like we have the examples, the high-profile examples, like this guy, reporter from New York Times, Carlos Tejada. He had 2 injections, was bragging about it, how wonderful it is and it's safe and protects him. Then went and got a booster and was dead the next day. That's what I'm talking about. So, he had 2 less toxic things, and then he went and got another injection and he's dead now. And 49-year-old healthy guy, 2 kids. Okay. So that's my point. This is very, very dangerous. You should not get these injections. If we all stop complying, the criminal cartel cannot do anything. They don't have enough goons and forces to force us all. So if we do mass non-compliance, we win.
Exactly. That is the way out.
Yeah. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. Make everybody aware.
Thank you very much. I think it's very insightful, very important also for our own court case, because this proves beyond a reasonable doubt the willful misconduct of the various players, not only the regulators, but also the politicians, also the manufacturers. So we will, besides the court case, also file charges. And I hope that you can elaborate this research, and we will try to get it out as much as possible. It's very important that people are knowledgeable about what is really going on.
Yeah, I submitted this, the flu vaccine analysis, I submitted as a witness statement in a UK lawsuit that's going on right now. I can send you that and you can have it as a document if
Yes,
it's
please.
helpful. And there are many of us. I mean, I'm not the only person who did this. We have a group of people who are working on this, all independent in different countries, and we're all confirming this. So there are a variety of people now available to testify about this stuff and to help in court proceedings, help people find compensation for their injuries and things like that. And I encourage everybody to do that.
And the website is howbad.org?
Howbad.info.
.info. Howbad.info.
Yeah,
We will put it
howbad.info.
in the description of the video. Thank you very much for this presentation and for your insight.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Okay, we'll see.
Hoi, lieve mensen. Inmiddels zijn we in 2022 beland en zijn we nog hartstikke druk met vechten voor de vrijheid en voor een maatschappij die vooral over liefde en waarheid gaat. Zoals je achter mij kan zien, zijn we elke dag bezig om de waarheid aan het licht te brengen en mensen met elkaar in verbinding te brengen. En daar hebben we jullie steun hard voor nodig. Dat hebben jullie tot nu toe al gedaan en daar zijn we heel erg dankbaar voor. We hopen dat we dit nog in ieder geval de komende jaren kunnen doen en dat zal samen met jullie zijn. Dus bij deze wil ik jullie van harte bedanken voor alle donaties die jullie hebben gedaan en alle die jullie nog willen doen.